Yeah, guys, honestly, it's shocking to believe how fast this thing is strengthening. Look at the current winds. This is still a Category 4, 150 mile per hour sustained winds now. A Category 5 is 157. This is close to becoming a Category 5 here. And look at our pressure, 935 millibars. I've never seen pressure drop so fast in a hurricane. It's happened, but I just can't think of any, and 75 miles south of Grand Isle at this point. So it's still moving northwest at 15. This thing is on the verge of becoming a Category 5 hurricane as it makes its way towards the north. Now, is it possible this continues to strengthen? It is. The trends we've seen since 1 a.m., it is just crazy how fast this thing has intensified as it's made its way towards the Louisiana coast. The track still brings it into parts of lower Terrebonne, lower Lafourche, and going over into lower Jefferson to near Plaquemines. Anywhere in here, landfall remains possible. The eye itself has been running just a hair to the north and northeast of it, so it's possible that the exact eye or the center of it tracks closer to Lafourche Parish, maybe even up in towards the Grand Isle area. This could be a strong Cat 4 on the verge of becoming a 5, making landfall in southeast Louisiana. We have never had a hurricane this strong, with going back at least to the early 1900s, this strong making landfall. Betsy was 140 miles per hour. The great, that one that Doug was talking about was 145 miles per hour. This could very well be one of the strongest hurricanes we've ever experienced through parts of our area. Eric?
And explain just why that drop in millibar is so important for not just the intensity, but the depth of this storm.
Yeah, so I was just talking to you with this off air, and so as pressure drops, the winds are going to respond. As pressure is dropping, winds naturally pick up, low pressure here, and that high pressure in the air is just funneling down into this thing. Think of it as you're pulling down on a balloon and the water's rushing in. So the deeper it goes, the faster the water is going to go, and the faster the winds are going to go. Now, this interesting fact a meteorologist friend had posted, this is Ida's central pressure has dropped 50 millibars in 22 hours. That qualifies this as rapid deepening. Now, rapid deepening is more extensive than rapid intensifying. Now, rapid deepening with that pressure dropping, get this, only 11 hurricanes on record in the Atlantic have deepened at 50 millibars in 22 hours or faster.
And Peyton, quickly explain why that is so significant.
Because, well, one thing, it's nearly a Cat 5. Two, there's a big difference between a weakening hurricane at landfall and a strengthening hurricane at landfall. A strengthening hurricane at landfall is going to have a much bigger punch than a weakening one. It's ramping up all the way until landfall, and that is very possible with this storm as it continues to move towards the north and west. So at this point, you know, we talked about this a couple days ago. People were saying, is a Cat 5 possible? We said it's not out of the question. And it's not. I mean, it's only 7 miles per hour off. And the way this thing has strengthened all the way since 1 a.m. when I came in, it was a Category 2, and then it was a 3, and then it was a 4 an hour later, and now it's a strong 4. This thing will likely continue to intensify as it makes its way towards our coastal areas.
And what are the chances that this thing could still move a little? We're talking about the wobbling. We know it's going to wobble back and forth, but when the winds get this strong, is that wind field expanding any around that eye?
Yeah, so the wind field's naturally expanding. It contracts and expands in a hurricane. One thing that could happen with this one, and this happens in really intense hurricanes, they go through these things called eye wall replacement cycles, and that's what happened to Katrina. So Katrina was a Cat 5, and remember, it weakened. It went through an eye wall replacement cycle during that process, and that weakens it. And what it does is it allows that wind field to spread out, and then that eye has to contract again. So as you've seen ice skaters, they spin around, and when they bring their arms in, they go faster, right? So a hurricane's essentially the same. When the eye is bigger here and it's contracting, it's going to go faster and faster and faster. And then you'll get a new eye wall forming, and that's the replacement cycle. And then that new eye wall will be bigger, the winds will weaken just a little bit, and then it will contract back down and the winds will strengthen. I think we got a tornado warning or a tornado watch. I want to check on something real quick. Okay, we have a tornado watch. So we're going to be watching for that over the next, throughout today, as possibly isolated tornadoes. So that watch will be in effect for the area today, so we'll be watching not only the hurricane conditions, but of course any of these bands could produce some spin-offs.
And again, with the speed this thing is traveling right now, How much time does it have to intensify to a CAT5 or change course any?
It's got about 5 to 6 more hours over water. It's running into our shallow waters. Now the waters out here are pretty shallow, right? As you go out, you're not into the deep ocean water. So it'll be interesting to see, do we get any upwelling? And upwelling is when an intense hurricane like this that's moving at a fairly, it's not Holland, but it's not Stalin. And it can upwell some water, that cooler water, and that can sometimes decrease it or cap off the intensification process. It's possible it does that, but it's not a guarantee, and it's not doing it right now.
And are those waters warmer than some of the deeper water? Because it is
The
shallow?
surface, oh yeah, this water up here gets to the upper 80s to near 90 degrees.
And so that's not good either.
No, it's an immediate hot temperature, but you know, when you're talking about warm temperatures in the waters, you got to have great wind shear or low wind shear, not a lot of dry air, and we obviously don't have that. So that all coupled together is why we are seeing this, and we did expect it to intensify rapidly up until landfall. So this is all expected. It's just a little bit stronger than what we were thinking it was going to do.
And Payne, you said a moment ago, we've never had a storm this strong make landfall in Louisiana, which I think is such a strong statement from a place that has seen Katrinas and Betsy's. Meg was just naming some of the big storms that she's been through. Everybody's looking for a comparison. So what is the strongest storm we've had make landfall?
In Louisiana, it was Laura last year, actually. It was 150, so it was the same as what it's at right now. In our area, going back to at least, and off the top of my head, I can't think of what we've had 2 1850 hurricanes that were pretty significant, but I can't think of the names or the speeds. But going back to at least the 1915 that Doug was mentioning, the Great Hurricane in 1915, took a similar path as Ida. Betsy also is going to take, or this is taking a similar path as Betsy. Betsy was a Cat 4, but it was 140 miles an hour at landfall.
Wow.
The 1915 one, I believe, was 145 miles per hour at landfall. So we have never had, at least going back to the 1900s, a 150 plus mile per hour hurricane. And we've actually never had a Category 5 make landfall in Louisiana.
No.
Wow.
Camille made landfall in Mississippi, but it was in Bay St. Louis, Waveland, so it didn't classify as here. And it kind of skirted, the eye wall of Camille skirted down here towards Buras, but the actual eye did not make landfall, the center of it.
And I know you don't expect it to shift very much, if at all, before it makes landfall, but I know you were also surprised that the speed is up to 150 so fast.
Yeah.
Would that help shift it at all?
The speed, sometimes, you know, the speed of these things in the long term, we watch the strength and what that's going to do to the steering pattern. This thing could curve a little bit sooner. That is certainly possible. We've seen that with hurricanes in the past. But right now, if you look at our trends, it's still running right on the right side. So I think it's headed more towards Lafourche and Lower Jefferson. It may wobble though, and we talk about these wobbles. You know, wobbles are important at this point. They're not important when you're talking about the forecast 5 days out because we can't detect the wobbles. But when you get to this point, you really got to watch and see how this thing winds its way towards the coast. It could still make landfall near Plaquemines, Lower Jefferson, Grand Isle. Lafourche is here, Port Fourchon. Port Fourchon's right dead line in the center of it right there. And then so is Houma in the current forecast.
And Peyton, when we talk about it intensifying like this, does that mean a bigger storm surge? Will the storm surge estimates increase because of this?
Yeah, they would. Now, the storm surge is dependent on a couple different things. It has to do with about 3 different factors, really. The 2 we're watching are the intensity, how fast the winds are, but the structure of the wind field. Eric, we were talking earlier about why Katrina was such a devastating storm with surge, but it was only it was a Category 3 at landfall.
Yeah, and it was east of us. We were on the west side.
Yeah, it's because the wind field was giant. It was almost, I think, double of what we got here. And that's because it was a giant Category 5 in the Gulf of Mexico, and that wind field just had so much time to grow. This wind field, it's a decent wind field, but it's not nearly the size of Katrina. So the bigger the wind field, the more water it can push, but the stronger the winds, also the more water it can push. So it kind of is a trade-off there, but more so, the stronger the winds get, the storm surge will go up. That's why we've seen our estimates increase to 16 feet now.
And when you talk about the intensity of this wind, as you said, we've never had a Cat 5 hit Louisiana. When you've got, even if it stays a strong hurricane or a strong Category 4 at 150 mile an hour, sustained winds, that just wreaks havoc on everything in its path.
Yeah, it does. And you know, these strongest winds, this 150, maybe it ends up being 155, that would still be a Cat 4, or your gusts, which are 165 to 170, that's going to be near the center of the storm on the eastern eye wall here as it makes landfall. So the most intense part is going to be, I mean, not everyone's going to see 150-mile-an-hour winds. That will decrease pretty quickly, but there is a good chance a lot of our area does see over 100, maybe 120-mile-per-hour wind gusts. So you got to prepare for that. I hope you've prepared for it because you're basically out of time at this point, Eric.